Just a quick heads up, I've been very sick this week, so if my voice sounds a bit bleh, that is why. A majority of this show is dedicated to the relationship between Takagi and Nishikata. However, that is not to say that the show doesn't have fleshed out side characters or that they don't develop other relationships. It was watching Sneeze in particular that made me appreciate the side characters and how they give us more insight into the main duo. But we get ahead of ourselves. Let's begin with After School, an original story you can find in episode 5 from 8 minutes. The premise of this story is simple. Yukari and Nishikata are working on a camping trip guide together, and Yukari feels guilty that she is keeping Nishikata from walking home with Takagi. After Takagi has left, Yukari makes 2 mistakes when trying to guess what Nishikata is thinking about. She sees him counting and assumes that he is counting down the days until he can walk home with her again. She then sees his depressed expression and assumes that he is depressed about not being able to spend more time with her. Of course, as an audience who can read Nishikata's mind, we know that she is wrong. We know that Nishikata is actually counting the number of times he had been teased that day, and his depressed expression is due to his realization that the number of times being teased is not getting lower because Takagi is changing her behavior, but rather because he is spending less time with her. I've said it before and I'll say it again. Yukari is obsessed with romance, and she is especially interested in the relationship between Takagi and Nishikata. I have also said before that the reason she doesn't get this passionate about the relationship between Nakai and Mano is that their relationship from the outside is pretty general in its nature. She knows for a fact that they are going out, they don't hide it from anyone, and they do things that couples are known to do. With Takagi and Nishikata, on the other hand, things are far more ambiguous. There's a sense of mystery to the relationship. The blank spaces in their story allow Yukari to fill them in with a fairy tale-esque romance. I mentioned back in my Valentine's Day analysis that Yukari was the other POV character in the show, and I believe that this may be the reason. Yukari sees Takagi and Nishikata very similarly to how we as an audience view them. 2 kids who are in love with each other. The only difference is that Yukari doesn't get to see everything that we do. So while we understand that their current relationship is one of competition, Yukari imagines a much more conventional relationship. She specifically made that point in Tailing when she snubbed the idea that they were talking about a race as opposed to something more romantic. When you boil it down, Yukari is just like us. She is a part of the audience to this story. The only difference being that she is an audience member from within the show itself. The same cannot be said for Mina and Sane. When Takagi told them that she was not going out with Nishikata, they believed her and bring this up whenever the topic arises. What's somewhat interesting is that while they don't subscribe to this fantasy that Yukari does, their speculation on why Nishikata looks depressed is also wrong. Perhaps to show the audience just how well we have come to understand Nishikata and Takagi, by showing us the thoughts of people who don't know them nearly as well. Now let's move on to Sneeze, another story from episode 5 that can be found at 17 minutes. This story is based on the manga's 78th chapter, which used to be my favourite before Confession came out. There's not much I could say about Sane, Mina and Yukari in this story that I didn't just say for After School, so I'm probably going to skip over them and get straight to talking about Mano and Nakai. Now this interaction doesn't add anything to their dynamic. Nakai is dense, Mano feels inadequate, Nakai fixes the issue by being genuine. What is interesting to think about here is how their relationship can be interpreted as a warning for what might happen between Takagi and Nishikata if they enter a romantic relationship too soon. Nishikata, as I'm sure you know, is a serial overthinker. In the present day, his overthinking results in him overcomplicating the games he plays with Takagi, and on many occasions becomes his downfall. If he were dating Takagi the way he is now, I don't think it's too much of a stretch to say that his overthinking could translate to feeling inadequate, just like Mano does about her relationship with Nakai. We then move on to Hojo and Hamaguchi. Hamaguchi, just like Nishikata, is awkward around the concept of intimacy. The difference, however, is that Hamaguchi is fully aware of his feelings for Hojo and tries his best to fight through his nerves to get closer to her. Hamaguchi is what Nishikata would be like if he knew he liked Takagi and wanted to act on it. Another big difference between their situations is that Nishikata doesn't have to act on his feelings, because Takagi is doing enough acting for the both of them. One of my favourite fanfictions for this show is a story called Breaking the Status Quo by Jibber Jabber, who begins their story with Nishikata having a nightmare that Takagi has lost interest in him and acts towards him with hostility. While Hamaguchi doesn't have to deal with hostility, he is trying to woo a girl that currently feels nothing for him, so he has to put in an effort that Nishikata has currently never had to. For now. The last thing worth mentioning in regards to this scene is the contrast between it and Bitter Taste. Hamaguchi, just like Nishikata, took Kimura's advice and drank coffee to appear more mature. While both Hamaguchi and Nishikata would suffer for drinking coffee, Nishikata came out of the situation having gained nothing, whereas Hamaguchi gets a short moment to admire the girl he likes, as she asks him if he is okay. Lastly, we get a scene between Takeo and Kimura. Honestly, there's not much to talk about here except for Kimura's indifference to his friends getting into relationships, claiming that nothing will change. One might think that this means Kimura doesn't care about his friends being in relationships, but we will learn by the end of the season that this is far from the truth. So what has been the point of this analysis? What message are we to take away from these stories? Well, I would say that looking into the potential ways that Nishikata and Takagi's dynamic could be different goes to show us just how perfect these two are for each other. The story would not work nearly as well if Takagi were more like Hojo or if Nishikata were more like Nakai. So making us think about these things helps us to appreciate the dynamic that they do have. This sentiment is reflected in the final moments of Sneeze when Nishikata accidentally sets off the Kyun keychain he got from Takagi as a birthday present. Takagi would have been pleased enough to know that Nishikata liked her present enough to carry it with him, but then he also battles through his embarrassment to thank her, and she seems very happy that he is seemingly working hard to be more open with her. And that is it for this analysis. Thank you to Orion Tran for supporting me on Patreon. If you'd like to join Orion or see the outtakes for free, you can do so via the links in the description. Thank you all very much for watching, and I will see you next time.